The town of Silver Creek lay nestled at the edge of the Rocky Mountains in the spring of 1881. Snow still lingered on the highest ridges, but the valley was turning green with the promise of a new season. Mary Thompson guided the reins of the wagon with steady hands, though her heart pounded with each creak of the wheels. She was 32 years old, a widow for nearly a year, and the mother of two girls who clung to the seat beside her. Their father had died in a mining accident the previous summer, leaving Mary with debts she could never hope to repay. When the bank had taken their home in Denver, she had sold what little remained and come west chasing a rumor of work in a town she had never seen. Sarah, the older girl at 10, kept her eyes fixed on the mountains, her jaw tight as though she would not allow herself to show fear. Emily, only 7, leaned against Mary's arm and whispered, "Mama, will there be a place for us?" Here Mary's throat ached, but she forced her voice to remain calm. "We will find a place, sweetheart. God has not brought us this far to abandon us now." The wagon rolled into the main street where rough boardwalks lined weathered buildings, and the smell of coal smoke hung in the air. Men in work shirts and boots passed by, nodding politely but not stopping. Silver Creek was not unkind, but it was wary, the kind of place where every stranger was judged by what they could contribute. Mary pulled the horse to a halt in front of the mercantile. The girls hopped down and stood close while she stepped inside to inquire about rooms. The storekeeper, a heavy man with kind eyes, shook his head. "Boarding house is full, Mrs. Thompson. Miners have taken every bed. There's the hotel, but $2 a night is steep." Mary's heart sank. She had less than $15 left. Food and lodging would swallow that in days. "Thank you," she murmured, turning back to her daughters. Outside, a storm cloud was building over the mountains. The wind carried the chill scent of rain, and the girls huddled against Mary's skirts. She felt the familiar wave of panic, the fear that had stalked her since the day she buried her husband. What if she had brought them here only to fail again? What if there was nowhere left to turn? "Ma'am," a voice said behind her. Mary spun, startled, and found herself looking up into the face of a man astride a tall chestnut horse. He wore a broad hat that shadowed his eyes, but his expression was gentle. "You look like you could use a hand." She straightened, unwilling to appear desperate. "We are simply resting a moment. The road has been long." The stranger dismounted, landing lightly despite his height. He was broad-shouldered, his vest dusty from the trail his boots worn. He extended a hand in greeting. "Adam Carter. I run the Riverbend Ranch a few miles east. Folks call me a fool for offering, but I've got a bunkhouse standing empty. Storm's rolling in. You and your girls are welcome to shelter there until you get settled." Mary hesitated, her pride battling with her fear. She had been raised to guard her reputation carefully, to avoid accepting favors from men she did not know. Yet her daughters shivered at her side, their thin dresses no match for the mountain wind. "I would not wish to impose," she said softly. "It's no imposition," Adam replied. "My sister keeps the house. She'll be glad of the company. Children make a place feel alive." His eyes flicked toward Sarah and Emily, and his smile widened just enough to ease Mary's tension. The girls looked up at her, pleading without words. Mary drew a deep breath and nodded. "Very well, Mr. Carter. We accept, at least for tonight." Within the hour, they were riding in his wagon, their few belongings piled at their feet. The storm broke before they reached the ranch, rain drumming against the canvas cover, thunder rolling across the valley. But when they turned into the wide pasture and saw the lights glowing from the windows of a sturdy farmhouse, Mary felt the first flicker of hope she had known in many months. Inside, Adam's sister Margaret welcomed them, warmly bustling to serve hot stew and bread, fresh from the oven. Sarah and Emily ate ravenously, their cheeks pink with warmth at last. Mary thanked their hosts again and again, but Adam only shook his head. "No thanks needed. A ranch is more than cattle and fences. It's the people who give it life." That night, lying in a clean bed with her daughters curled beside her, Mary listened to the storm fade beyond the walls. She whispered a prayer of gratitude and a vow to herself. She would work, she would prove her worth, and she would give her children a future. She did not yet know what role Adam Carter would play in that future, but his kindness had given her a beginning. And sometimes a beginning was all that mattered. Morning came clear and cold, the grass washed bright by the night rain. Mary rose before a first light, careful not to wake Sarah and Emily, and followed the faint glow of the kitchen lamp. Margaret stood at the stove, already sleeves rolled to the elbow, moving with a quick economy that spoke of years of keeping a place like this running. Mary paused at the threshold, then stepped in with quiet resolve. "Let me help, Mary," said her voice low so as not to wake the house. "I can chop, stir, scrub, whatever you need." Margaret turned surprise, softening at once into approval. "Well then, you can take the dough while I tend the eggs. A ranch eats early and eats hearty. I hope you're not afraid of flour." Mary smiled, lifting the bowl, grateful for the work of hands that steadied the mind. Together they shaped loaves, fried potatoes with onions, and set a kettle to boiling. When Adam came in from the yard with the dawn on his hat brim, he stopped short at the sight of Mary moving through the kitchen like she had been born there. "That smells like a good day," he said simply. The way he said it without flourish warmed Mary more than the stove. Sarah and Emily shuffled in hair-mussed eyes bright at the prospect of a meal that was not measured against the last coins in their mother's purse. They ate until their shoulders relaxed and their speech turned playful again. Mary found herself laughing with them, the sound surprising like a stream freed from winter ice. After breakfast, Adam pushed his chair back and nodded toward the window. "I will show you around if you are willing. There is work in every direction. You tell me what suits you and what does not." Mary glanced at Margaret, who gave a little tilt of the chin that meant go on now. Outside, the ranch rolled toward the river fences, straight as hymn-lines cottonwoods whispering in the breeze. Men moved about with practiced rhythm, checking tack, leading horses, mending a section of rail. Adam explained as they walked, his words spare, his gestures precise. "We keep near 200 head," he said. "The river bend is our lifeline in a dry year. My father settled here before the war added to it, slowly. I took it over 8 years ago after my folks passed. Good men keep it standing, and we try to be good to them in return." Mary listened, measuring the place by the way it breathed, the way people met her eyes with straightforward kindness, without prying. They reached a small building with windows on 3 sides, the panes a little fogged from age. Inside stood a rough table, a chalkboard, and a scatter of homemade benches. "What is this?" Mary asked, curiosity pricking at the sight of the chalk ledge dusted white. "Old storage should turn schoolhouse," Adam said. "We started it last year when the teacher in town married and moved east. A few families hoped someone would come out to teach now and then. But nobody had the time to spare regular, and it fell quiet." His gaze slid to her, unreadable. "Your girls said you used to do some teaching in Denver, helping younger children at church." Mary felt heat rise to her cheeks, surprised the girls had spoken of it. "I did," she admitted. "Not proper training, but I learned how to keep order and light a spark. There is no sound I love more than a child catching a new idea, as if it were a bird landing in their hand." Adam looked at the chalkboard again as if he could see children in every seat. "There are 6 families within riding distance. I reckon we could fill these benches. Come Monday if you said the word. I would pay you fair room and board besides. I do not ask charity of you, Mary. I ask for your work because I believe in what you can do." She stared at the chalk, at the sunlight turning the dust into a halo, and felt something open in her chest. Fear argued against hope, as it had for months, but hope would not be hushed. "I will think on it today," she said. "I want to do right by my girls, and by any child who comes. If I say yes, I must be sure I can give what is needed." "That is a good answer," he said, and something like relief flickered in his eyes. "Come on, there is more to see." They walked the corrals where a sorrel mare nickered at them and pushed her nose into Emily's small palm when the girls joined later. Mary showed Sarah how to coil a rope neat, and Adam laughed at the speed with which the child learned. Emily trailed him like a duckling, asking questions about everything from the brand to the bell around the lead cow's neck. Adam answered each one without impatience, and Mary filed the sight of it away in her heart. Midday brought clouds again, but no storm, only a soft wind that smelled of river mud and willow. Mary and Margaret washed bedding in the big copper tub, then strung linens to dry like sails along the fence. They worked in easy rhythm, the kind that makes strangers into sisters. Margaret spoke of winters that cracked the boards and springs that saved the cattle. She spoke of men who came and went, honest and otherwise. She did not press Mary for details of Denver, and Mary was grateful. In the afternoon, Mary went back to the schoolhouse alone. She ran her hand along the table edge, rough but sound. She imagined Sarah and Emily there, and children from neighboring places, heads bent, mouths moving as they sounded out words. She picked up a chalk and wrote her name on the board small, At first, then larger, as if she were persuading herself that she still existed outside grief. Mary Thompson. Beneath it, she wrote the word home, then wiped it away almost at once, embarrassed by the earnestness of it, though nobody watched. She was not alone long. Boots scuffed in the doorway, and Adam leaned gently against the frame, hat in hand, as if the little room were a church. "I did not mean to bother you," he said. "I just wanted to be here when you decided. I find it helps to have somebody listen when a choice is being made." Mary smiled despite herself. "Do you always stand like a penitent when you make offers to folks?" He glanced down, huffed a quiet laugh. "Only when it matters." She studied his face, then the set of his jaw, the lines at the corners of his eyes that told of sun and long days, and worry born without complaint. Something in her settled. Adam Carter had given them shelter without asking anything in return. He let silence do its work, a courtesy she had not known she needed. She set the chalk back on the ledge. "I would like to try," she said. "If the families will send their children, I will teach them. I will need slates and readers where we can find them. I can start with what we have and build the rest from patience." His answer was a light in a dark room. "We can spare wood to fix benches, and Margaret will know where to beg and borrow books." "Monday it is." He paused, then added softly, "Thank you for believing this is worth doing." The next hour slid past in preparations. Margaret dug out a stack of worn primers she had tucked away when hope had seemed foolish. Adam sent a rider to the neighboring homesteads with a note written in his careful hand. Mary sorted scraps of paper and pencils short as a finger and sharpened them to points. Sarah and Emily cleaned the windows till the light poured in clean. By evening, the sky burned orange behind the cottonwoods. Supper was humble but plentiful. The ranch hands drew up their chairs, and Mary saw how they looked to Adam, without fear, only steadiness. A place takes its shape from the heart that leads it, she thought. As talk hummed low around the table, Adam turned to Mary. "Will you say a word?" he asked. "A welcome for the work ahead." Mary swallowed unready, but found that words came when called by purpose. "We lost much this past year," she said, her voice even. "We came here with little but our names and our hope. Today you gave us not only food and shelter, but a place to be of use. Tomorrow we will return that gift the best we can. May our hands be strong and our hearts be steady. May our children learn the letters that spell out a kinder life. Amen." After supper, Adam walked her out to the yard where the night had cooled to a silver hush. The river spoke softly beyond the cottonwoods. He kept his hands folded careful, as if he carried something fragile, invisible between them. "There is one more thing," he said. "If any man speaks ill of you for accepting a roof, if any tongue wags in town about a woman alone at a ranch, know this. You and your girls are under my protection while you are here. Not as charity, as neighbors. The folks who work for me will hear it from my mouth, and I reckon the rest will learn it soon enough." Mary did not trust her voice then. She looked up at him and nodded a quiet that meant more than thanks could hold. For the first time since her world had fallen in, she felt the ground under her feet as something she could stand on, rather than something she might sink through. She would begin again here. She would teach letters and numbers, but also the courage to claim belonging. When she went to bed that night, Emily tucked against her side and Sarah breathing slow on the other pillow. Mary lay awake and listened to the river. She thought of the chalk words she had written and erased. She mouthed it in the dark, not yet daring to speak it aloud. Home. The first Monday morning dawned bright and sharp, the air carrying the smell of dew and wood smoke. Mary tied her hair back, smoothed her plain dress, and walked with Sarah and Emily toward the little schoolhouse. Her stomach twisted with nerves. She had taught children before, but this felt different. Here she was, not just filling time in a church basement. Here she was responsible for the beginnings of something new. They arrived to find 6 other children already waiting, some perched on fence rails, some tugging nervously at their sleeves. Their mothers stood nearby, uncertain whether to trust this stranger with their young ones. Adam was there too, speaking in his steady way, assuring the families that Mary had both knowledge and heart. When she appeared, his eyes met hers, calm and reassuring. She breathed easier. Mary clapped her hands gently. "Good morning, children. My name is Mary Thompson. Today we begin learning together." She guided them inside, helped them find seats on the rough benches, and began with simple introductions. Names, ages, what they already knew. Sarah, serious as ever, answered quickly. Emily whispered but managed to say her letters. One boy, Tommy, proudly recited numbers up to 50, while little Clara only stared shyly at the floor until Mary knelt beside her and whispered encouragement. By mid-morning, the room buzzed with the uneven rhythm of a school in its first day of life. Outside, Adam lingered near the doorway, pretending to adjust the latch, but really watching. He saw the way Mary bent to a child's height, the way her voice softened when fear flickered in small eyes, the way her own daughter seemed taller beside her. He thought then that this schoolhouse would not be empty again, not while Mary Thompson lived. When the children left at noon, Mary sat alone at the table, exhausted but lit from within. Margaret came carrying a basket of bread and cheese. "You look like a woman who has fought a war and won the first skirmish," she said with a grin. Mary laughed, shaking flour dust from her sleeve. I had forgotten how much joy there is in their faces. I had also forgotten how much noise a dozen voices can make at once. Through the weeks, the rhythm deepened. Mornings filled with lessons in reading and sums, afternoons with ranch chores. Mary found herself balancing chalk with washboards, ink with stew pots. She grew accustomed to the creak of the schoolhouse door, the scrape of chairs, the eager or weary shouts of children racing outside when lessons ended. Sarah took to helping the younger ones, guiding Clara's hand to form letters. Emily learned songs from Margaret and sang them softly to the others during breaks. Adam visited often, bringing a new primer, a slate polished smooth, or sometimes only his quiet presence leaning against the wall while children recited. The ranch hands teased him for finding so much interest in the alphabet, but he only smiled. One evening after a long day of teaching and mending clothes, Mary carried a basket of laundry to the line. Adam was there repairing a fence post by lamplight. He straightened when he saw her wiping sweat from his brow. "You work as hard as any hand I have," he said. "Harder maybe for you, never seem to rest." Mary shifted the basket, her cheeks warming. "I have been given shelter and trust. I will not waste either." He stepped closer, not too near, but near enough for her to see the sincerity in his eyes. "Nobody here thinks you are wasting a thing. The children run home shouting your name. The hands say the place feels different with laughter in the yard. I say you have turned a ranch into a community." Mary's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him how his words steadied her more than he could know, but instead she hung a sheet and let the silence stretch. Adam returned to his fence, and the night settled soft around them both. By autumn, the schoolhouse had become the heart of Silver Creek's outlying farms. Families rode miles to send their children, and neighbors began gathering on Sundays for singing and shared meals. Mary felt herself woven into the fabric of the valley, no longer a visitor, but a thread that belonged. Yet grief had not vanished. There were nights when she still dreamed of her husband, of the mine collapse that stole him. She would wake with tears on her cheeks, staring at the beams of the ceiling. On those nights, Sarah sometimes stirred and reached for her hand in the dark. The child was growing older faster than she should, carrying weight beyond her years. Mary prayed she might give her daughters more than lost to remember. Adam, too, carried shadows. Once after a storm, Mary found him standing by the river hat in his hands, staring into the current as though it carried ghosts. She did not intrude, but later he returned with red eyes and quiet words. "The river has taken and given both," he said. She wondered what he meant but did not press. The turning point came in October when one of the ranch hands was thrown from a horse and broke his leg. Mary rushed with Margaret to tend him, fashioning splints and boiling cloths. Her calm under pressure surprised everyone, herself most of all. Afterward, Adam sought her out. "You kept your head when the rest of us were scrambling," he said. "I do not forget that." Mary looked at him, the lantern light catching the strength in his face, and felt a flutter she tried to deny. She told herself it was only gratitude, only the relief of standing beside someone steady. But deep inside, she knew it was more. As the leaves turned gold and the first frost silvered the grass, whispers began among the neighbors. Some wondered aloud if the rancher and the widow might find in each other what life had taken away. Mary blushed when she heard, quick to deny. But when Adam walked beside her, matching his steps to hers, when his laughter rumbled low at Emily's jokes, when his hand brushed hers by accident and neither pulled away at once, the whispers rang with truth. Still, Mary held herself cautious. She feared the talk of tongues, feared the rush of hope too soon. Yet every evening when she closed the schoolhouse door and saw the farmhouse light burning, she felt the pull of belonging grow stronger. And one night when Adam came to the porch with 2 cups of coffee and a silence as comfortable as any words, she knew that her story in Silver Creek was only beginning. The first snow fell earlier than anyone expected. It came in soft flakes at dawn, covering the fences and rooftops in a thin white blanket that glowed under the rising sun. Mary stood at the cabin window with Sarah and Emily, pressed against her sides, their breath fogging the glass. Winter had arrived, and with it, new trials. Adam rode out that morning to check the herd, his horse leaving dark prints in the snow. Mary watched him from the window, her heart pulling in 2 directions. One part feared for him, knowing the cold and the river crossings could steal a man's strength. The other part swelled with quiet admiration. She had never known a man who shouldered responsibility so willingly, not only for cattle and land, but for people as well. The schoolhouse grew colder with each day, but Adam had the hands cut wood and fix the stove until it glowed hot enough to keep the children warm. Mary taught them wrapped in shawls, chalk dust rising in the golden light of afternoon. Sometimes she paused to watch the children bend over their slates, and gratitude rose so fierce it startled her. After months of wandering, she and her daughters belonged. Yet winter also carried sickness. Influenza swept through town, leaving fevers and empty chairs at supper tables. Mary worked beside Margaret day and night, carrying broth, washing linens, whispering prayers. When Emily developed a cough that rattled in her small chest, Mary's hands shook as she pressed cool cloths against her daughter's forehead. Adam came often during those nights, bringing firewood, medicine, whatever he could. Once when Mary was near collapse, he took her by the shoulders and said firmly, "You must rest, or you will fall too." She wanted to argue, but his eyes left no room. For the first time in years, she let herself lean on someone else, just enough to catch her breath. Emily recovered slowly, and Mary wept with relief when her daughter laughed again. But Adam did not escape untouched. A week later, he staggered into the yard, pale and coughing, and before long he was burning with fever in the main house. The ranch hands carried him inside, and Mary sat at his bedside, memories of her husband's last days clawing at her heart. Adam muttered in delirium, words jumbled, sometimes calling names Mary did not know. One night he whispered, "I should have been there. I should have saved you." And Mary realized he carried an old wound deeper than she had guessed. She held his hand until the fever broke, whispering, "It is not your fault. You are here now. Rest." When he finally woke clear-eyed, he found her slumped in the chair, her hair fallen loose around her face. He reached weakly to touch a strand. "You stayed," he murmured. "Of course," she replied, her voice rough with exhaustion. "You would have done the same for me." Something unspoken passed between them, then something that could not yet be named but that warmed the cold room more than any fire. By Christmas, the sickness had loosened its grip on the valley. Families gathered at the ranch, filling the house with song and laughter. Mary's daughters decorated a pine tree with paper chains, their giggles ringing like bells. The ranch hands played fiddles and told stories, and Margaret served pie until no one could eat more. When the children were dozing by the fire, Adam approached Mary with a small wrapped bundle. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal a locket of silver. Inside was a painted likeness of Sarah and Emily, on one side, the other side empty. "For whatever the future holds," he said quietly. Mary's throat tightened. "It is beautiful. Thank you." Adam hesitated, then took her hands in his. "Mary, I have come to care for you and your girls more than I thought possible. I will not rush you, but when you are ready, I would like to court you properly." Mary's heart pounded. She remembered her vow after her husband's death that she would never open herself to such loss again. But looking into Adam's eyes, she felt not fear, but hope. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "You do not need to say anything yet," he replied. "Just know my heart is yours if you will have it." That night, lying awake while snow whispered against the window, Mary turned the locket in her hands and felt a new chapter, waiting just beyond the edge of her courage. The new year arrived with a sky clear and blue sunlight bouncing off snow that still blanketed the ground. The ranch hands hung pine boughs on the porch rails, and Margaret bustled with flour on her apron, humming wedding tunes that made Mary blush. On the first day of January, the ranch house filled with neighbors and friends. They came on horseback and in wagons, stomping snow from their boots, carrying pies and jars of preserves. Mary stood in a simple blue dress Margaret had helped her sew, her daughters at her side, their faces alight with pride. Adam waited at the front of the room, tall and steady, his eyes fixed on her, as though she were the only soul alive. When the minister spoke the words that bound them, Mary felt the weight of sorrow lift, replaced by a warmth that filled every corner of her chest. The girls presented rings they had fashioned from horseshoe nails with the blacksmith's help, crude but shining with love. Adam slipped one onto Mary's finger, then knelt so the girls could slide their gifts onto his hand. Laughter and tears mingled in the room, and for the first time since her husband's death, Mary felt the full embrace of joy. Life after the wedding shifted gently but surely. Mary moved with her daughters into the big house, where mornings began with the smell of fresh coffee and evenings ended with the sound of Adam's voice reading aloud by lamplight. The schoolhouse thrived, filled each day with children eager to learn, their cheeks pink from the cold. Mary found purpose not only as wife and mother, but as teacher, her three roles interwoven like threads in a strong fabric. Adam treated Sarah and Emily as his own, guiding them with patience. He taught Sarah to ride properly, correcting her posture until she sat tall in the saddle. He showed Emily how to brush a horse's coat until it shone, listening to her chatter without a hint of irritation. Mary often watched from the porch, her heart swelling at the sight of her daughters laughing again, carefree as children should be. Still, shadows lingered. At times, Mary caught Adam staring into the fire with an expression heavy with memory. She knew he carried the grief of losing his parents, and more secretly of someone he had whispered to in fever. Once late at night, she asked him about it. He told her of Sarah, the woman he had loved and lost years before, and of the child who had not lived to be born. Mary took his hand then and said softly, "Grief does not vanish, but it can live beside love." His eyes glistened, and he kissed her brow in wordless thanks. As winter eased and spring crept over the valley, the ranch came alive with calves in the pastures and foals in the corral. Mary moved through her days with new energy, for she carried a secret beneath her heart. When she told Adam she was expecting a child in the fall, his joy was uncontainable. The ranch hands teased him for walking around with a grin as wide as the river, but Mary only laughed, feeling her own spirit lifted by his delight. The girls were equally thrilled. Sarah vowed to help with the baby's care, while Emily declared she would sing lullabies every night. Mary knew challenges lay ahead, but the thought of new life bound them even closer. One evening in May, as the sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, Mary sat on the porch with Adam. The girls played with the ranch dogs in the yard, their laughter mingling with the bark of happy animals. Adam reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle. "Are you happy?" He asked, a question he seemed to carry like a refrain. "Completely," she answered, pressing his hand to her growing belly. "I never imagined finding this kind of peace again." "Nora," he admitted. "For years I believed my heart had died. Then you came and I learned it could beat stronger than ever." They sat in silence, then watching the evening settle. Their hands joined, their future unfolding before them like the open plains. Mary knew storms would come again, as they always did in life. But with Adam beside her, she no longer feared the unknown. She had lost, endured, and rebuilt. And now she had found not only shelter, but a home, a love that promised to last through every season to come. Summer on the ranch was a season of long days and steady labor. The river ran swift with melted snow from the peaks. The grass grew high in the pastures, and the cattle moved slow under the relentless sun. Mary woke each morning before dawn, moving easily now despite the weight of the child she carried. Her hands worked at lessons in the schoolhouse, her voice carried across the yard calling the children in for supper. Her laughter rose often when Adam teased her about working harder than any hired man. Her daughters thrived in the wide air of the ranch. Sarah grew tall and serious, shadowing the ranch hands, learning knots and tack, her eyes always searching for more to understand. Emily softened every corner with her joy singing, while she swept humming while she carried buckets of water. The girls no longer carried the tight look of hunger and fear they had brought from Denver. Now they ran barefoot through grass and came home at dusk with cheeks flushed and eyes bright. Adam's devotion showed in 1,000 small ways. He made sure Mary's chair on the porch was always cushioned, that the path to the schoolhouse was cleared when rain left it muddy, that her girls had ponies of their own to ride. When neighbors came to call, he introduced her as his wife with quiet pride, and Mary felt herself stand taller each time. Yet life on the frontier was never without trial. In July, a wildfire sparked in the foothills, racing across the dry land with terrifying speed. Smoke rolled into the valley, and the ranch hands scrambled to cut fire breaks. Adam led them shouting commands through the haze, his shirt soaked with sweat, his face streaked with ash. Mary gathered the children in the schoolhouse, turning it into a refuge. She wet claws to press against small mouths and noses, calming frightened eyes with gentle words. She kept her own fear hidden, but inside her heart hammered. She thought of the child within her, of the daughters at her side, and prayed fiercely that the fire would spare them. After 2 days of smoke and labor, the flames veered away, leaving blackened hills but sparing the ranch. When Adam returned, his hair singed at the edges, Mary met him in the yard and clung to him without words. He held her close, whispering, "It's over, we're safe." She felt his chest rise and fall beneath her cheek, and for the first time she allowed herself to weep openly, not for loss, but for relief. As the land healed, so did their hearts. The community drew tighter, families bringing food to those who had lost barns, neighbors gathering to rebuild fences. Mary saw how Adam moved among them, not as a master, but as a brother, lending tools, giving time, never asking anything in return. She realized then that his strength was not only in his broad shoulders, but in the way he lifted others. August heat settled heavy over the valley, and Mary grew slower with each passing day. Margaret fussed over her, forbidding her to carry anything heavier than a basket of apples. Adam watched her with eyes that held both pride and worry, always nearby, always ready to steady her. One evening, as twilight spread lavender across the fields, Mary sat on the porch with Adam. The girls chased fireflies in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm air. Mary rested her hands on her swollen belly and turned to her husband. "Do you ever think," she asked, "how far we've come since that first day when you found us in town?" "Every day," he answered without hesitation. "I think of you standing there, tired and brave, and I thank God I had the sense to offer a roof." Mary smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "I thought it was only shelter then. I had no idea it was the beginning of everything." Adam reached for her hand, lifting it to his lips. "You're home now?" He whispered the words, carrying more meaning than they ever had before. Mary leaned against him, her daughters dancing in the yard, the stars beginning to show above. She felt the stir of life inside her, and knew that whatever trials came next, they would face them together. The grief of the past had not vanished, but it had given way to a future bright with promise. That night, as she drifted to sleep, Mary dreamed not of loss, but of harvest fields, of children's laughter, of Adam's hand steady in hers. She dreamed of belonging, of a home built not of walls, but of love strong enough to weather every storm. September brought cool mornings and skies the color of polished steel. Mary felt the child pressing lower with each passing day, her steps slower, her body heavy, but her spirit strong. Margaret stayed close, keeping herbs and cloths at the ready, while Adam hovered in his quiet way, pretending to busy himself with chores, but never straying far from the house. When the hour finally came, it was just before dawn. The wind rattled the shutters and rain pattered on the roof. Mary gripped the bedpost, sweat shining on her brow, while Margaret urged her through each wave of pain. Adam paced the hallway, every creak of the floorboards echoing his helplessness. Sarah and Emily sat in the kitchen with mugs of warm milk, their faces pale with worry. After long hours that felt like years, a cry pierced the storm. Margaret emerged, smiling, carrying a small bundle wrapped in a quilt. Adam stepped forward, his hands trembling, as he took his child for the first time. "A daughter," Margaret announced proudly. "Strong lungs, good color." Adam bent over Mary, who lay exhausted but radiant. "She's perfect, Mary," whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "What shall we call her?" Adam looked from the baby's face to Mary's, then to Sarah and Emily, who had crept to the doorway, their fear replaced by awe. "Hope," he said softly. "She is Hope." The name settled into the room like a blessing. Days passed and the house filled with new rhythms. The girls doted on their sister, competing for turns to rock her or fetch blankets. Mary moved slower, but with a light in her eyes that even fatigue could not dim. Adam could often be found cradling the infant in one arm while writing ledgers with the other, a sight that made the ranch hands grin and shake their heads. The schoolhouse reopened after harvest, and Mary carried her daughter in a basket beside her desk, teaching while the baby slept to the hum of children reciting lessons. Neighbors marveled at her strength, but Mary only smiled and said, "We are strongest when we have reason to be." Winter came again, snow feathering the hills, but the ranch stood steady. The family gathered by the fire each evening, Sarah reading aloud, Emily singing, Adam carving small toys from wood, Mary rocking Hope in her arms. The shadows of grief that had once haunted them grew faint, replaced by the glow of a love tested by hardship and made durable by faith. On Christmas Eve, the community once more filled the ranch house. Tables sagged under the weight of food, candles flickered in every window, and laughter echoed off the beams. Adam lifted his daughter high so all could see her rosy cheeks and bright eyes. To Hope, he said simply, and every voice joined in the toast. Later, when the guests had gone and the children slept, Adam and Mary stood on the porch watching snow fall in the quiet night. He wrapped his arm around her and she leaned against his chest. When you came here, he murmured, you were weary and afraid, and I told you you were home. I meant it then, but I never knew how much I needed you to make this place truly so. Mary looked up at him, her eyes shining with love. You gave us shelter when we had nothing. You gave us a future when we could not see one. Now we have a family and a home in every sense of the word. Their lips met in a kiss as gentle as falling snow. Behind them, the house glowed with warmth, and beyond the porch, the land stretched wide and silent under the stars. Mary knew storms would come again as they always did, but she no longer feared them. She had her daughters, her husband, her newborn child, and a community bound together by trust. She had lost once, but she had been given a second chance, and she would guard it fiercely. In the hush of that winter night, with the man she loved beside her and the promise of tomorrow in her arms, Mary finally understood what it meant to be truly home.